Welcome back to the Crash Course podcast. My name is CraigCrash Collins, flying solo this week. B. Scott is off doing B. Scott things, making us proud on the 9 to 5 side of things. So it is just me this week. Yes, CraigCrash stands in the chat. It is your greatest dream. It is just me here tonight. So whether or not you're tuning in on 3C Media on YouTube, whether you're catching us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, welcome in to episode 183 as we are going to be discussing a lot of college hoops tonight, a lot of college basketball on tap because it is March. It is one of the best times of the year, and we're going to be getting into something that I'm very proud of. It took a lot more prep than we normally, because normally this is our conference tournament show. We just get into the weeds, kind of make our predictions, kind of a palate cleanser. I know I've been using that word a lot lately, but a palate cleanser for our our NCAA tournament bracket breakdown. But this week I thought we'd do it a little bit differently. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for you guys. We're going to do a tier list of all of the March Madness teams, telling you where we think they're going to end up this year. I'm saying we out of habit. It's just me, as I mentioned before. But yeah, I'm going to give you my opinion on where I think some of these teams will end up as the tournament goes on here. So, Selection Sunday, less than a week away. It's going to be this week. So we're getting ready for that. So we'll try to tell you where we think teams are going to end up. But I first want to start with and open the show with this. We're going to talk about some of the college basketball teams here in the state of Indiana. Of course, we're an Indiana-based podcast, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Hoosier squads, and we're going to revisit our forecasts for those Hoosier squads, IU, Purdue, and Notre Dame. We're going to revisit kind of what we thought these teams would look like at the beginning of the year and kind of where they've ended up and what we think they're going to do here in the month of March. So let's go ahead and get right into it. First of all, let's start with IU. The question before the season for us on our show was hot or cold. The Indiana Hoosiers will make the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2016. I said cold at the beginning of the year, and of course, I got a lot of heat on Twitter, not giving IU their due. We revisited this topic about a month ago, and we asked, hey, is IU back? And as far as being competitive, B. Scott and I both said that we thought they were back to a streak of being competitive, but we weren't quite for sure as far as obviously they're not back to what they were in the 80s, but, only time would tell if they are truly back to, getting back to being a power in college basketball. And they had a streak coming up where they, either 4 or 5 of their last 9 games were against ranked opponents, and we're like, all right, let's see what they do here in the month of February, and if they can manage, to get in good shape. They were 16-5 at the time, 7-4 in the Big Ten, and then, at the time they were also projected as an A seed in the tournament. This was right before they played Illinois. But since the start of February, they've lost 7 of their last 9 games, including all 5 to the ranked opponents they've played. Their only wins down this final stretch have come to Maryland and Minnesota. Their 4 worst shooting nights have come during this stretch. They've dropped from 3rd to 5th in the Big Ten in field goal percentage, and they've dropped from 3rd to 6th in points, in the Big Ten. So it's just really been the wheels coming off, and I know that there has been some injuries. They've dealt without Rob Finney for a while, and he was, of course, one of the heroes of that, win over Purdue, which launched the discussion whether or not they were back. But yeah, it's just not been the Hoosiers' time as of late. You've seen Trace Jackson Davis go from 2nd to 6th in the Big Ten in points. He scored less than 17 points, which is his career average in 6 of the final 9 games. This is in spite of Xavier Johnson and Race Thompson still producing in terms of points. Also, as kind of a side note, they've gone from 4th to 7th in steals. So, you've had your best player kind of go cold. You've dealt with injuries. The wheels have come off as far as the offense is concerned. And now the Hoosiers look on the outside looking in, and that prediction looks to be fair. Now, They do finish 9-11 in the Big Ten. That's ninth. They're currently listed as the first team out, according to ESPN bracketology. So looking forward at the month of March, what they could potentially do. We are looking at the Big Ten tournament. The Hoosiers do play Michigan on Thursday. And I mean, Michigan's another team that they're kind of on that bubble watch. They're on that kind of outside, not really outside looking in. Michigan's in right now. They're one of the last four teams that I think Joe Lunardi is giving the bye. But if IU beats Michigan and then manages to beat Illinois, because I don't think they can just beat Michigan, because if you beat Michigan and then lose to Illinois, I think you're definitely done. But if they can manage to, beat Michigan and then beat Big Ten regular season champion Illinois, that I think you might be able. I mean, that could be a deciding factor for playing the coin toss game of whether or not IU gets in the tournament over maybe a Michigan, especially because Illinois is already in the tournament. You might be able to catch them napping a little bit. If IU can pull that off, then I think that they might have a shot to make the NCAA tournament. They kind of control their own destiny in a way. The bad news is that the Hoosiers lost to Michigan by 18 at home in their only meeting versus the Wolverines. That was coming off of the big win over Purdue, and they lost to Illinois by 17 to kick off the February skid. So it's looking like cold was the correct take there. Now looking at the Purdue Boilermakers, speaking of which, the question for them was, the season is a disappointment if Purdue doesn't make the Sweet 16. My answer to that was hot. I feel like it's even more hot now with the season being the first season that Purdue was ranked number 1 at one point, although it is the most Purdue thing of all time if they were to losing early in the tournament the same season they were ranked number 1. It's really hard to gauge where Purdue is going. I mean, they've got 25 wins, they're 25-6 on the season. The last time they had 25 plus wins and only 6 losses was, I believe, it was one of the first few years of Matt Painter's tenure. They've only done it one other time where they've had 25 plus wins and 6 losses, and they made the Sweet 16 under Matt Painter. That's the only time they had done that under Matt Painter previously. They made the Sweet 16. They're projected as a 3 seed by ESPN bracketology, as a 3 seed or better under Painter. In 2011, they had a round of 32 exit. In 2018, they made the Sweet 16, and in 2019, they made their first Elite 8 since 2000. So, I mean, the trend's kind of been going up there. But then you kind of look at the bad news of the trends and what Purdue has done with this kind of momentum previously all points towards, hey, you know what, Purdue can maybe still make a season out of this or a run out of this. But the kind of things that say maybe Purdue is a little doomed are the fact that they're 6-5 this season in games decided by 6 or fewer points. They're 3-4 in one possession games, including losing the lead in the final 30 seconds of 4 of their 6 losses. So I mean, you talk about the month of March, potentially nipping you, because I mean, you're going to have, close games in March. You're going to have close games in the tournament, games decided by buzzer beaters, and that's not looked good for Purdue so far this season. This will be Purdue's 7th straight tournament appearance. When they finished in the top 2 of the Big Ten, that was, they've done that in 3 of the 6 seasons, previous seasons. They have made 2 Sweet 16 appearances and an Elite 8 appearance in 2019. With the times that they have finished 3rd or worse in the Big Ten, that's been 3 times they've done that. They've lost in the first round all 3 years, and of course they finished 3rd this year. So, I mean, you look at the trends of, what Purdue has done in the past, that kind of thing. There's a lot of signs that point to Purdue potentially making a run of this. There's also signs that say Purdue could potentially lose in the first round or the round of 32. But I will say this, if we've learned anything about Purdue sports, it's that they like to build up your hopes before they rip your heart out. So I'm still anticipating a Sweet 16 run. I mean, we talked about it during the football season. I mean, they beat Michigan State. Oh my gosh, Purdue could win the Big Ten. Or not win the Big Ten, but at least, win the Big Ten West and make the Big Ten championship game. They lose to Ohio State in a big fashion. This year, in basketball, they're the number 1 team. in the country, this season's going according to plan, and then they, kind of fall off a little bit. And I mean, by fall off, I mean, I don't think they've exited the top 10, very often this season, if at all. But still, the expectations going into the tournament are like, well, it's been a rough go of it the last few weeks. So, I wouldn't, be surprised if they make a first round exit or something like that. And this is going to be the time where they, make the Sweet 16, get your hopes up. Oh my gosh, they're going to make it. And then that's when they're going to, unfortunately, fall short. Now, finally, to Notre Dame. Hot or cold, Notre Dame will finish above 500 in the ACC for the first time since 2016-2017. My answer to that was hot, and it was correct. So claps for a correct take here. They finished second in the ACC, 15-5. They've had, Prentice Hub, Nate Laszewski, and Paul Atkinson have contributed kind of like we thought they would, but then again, not like we thought they would, because they've kind of been on the back seat of things. It's been freshman Blake Wesley who has emerged as leading scorer, 15 points per game, and junior Dane Goodwin, who has been a big contributor, 14 points per game. So, I mean, this Notre Dame team has been very strong. I know the resume isn't like super overwhelming, but it's been good, and it makes you very excited to see Notre Dame kind of back to what we thought they could potentially, what we were used to seeing them kind of in the mid, 2010s. So, they have had a good season. They're projected as a 10 seed in the tournament. So my outlook for them, I mean, they have wins over Kentucky, who was number 10 then and is number 5 now, and North Carolina, who just broke back into the top 25. They are 0-2 all time as a program as a 10 seed, but in their 12 appearances under Mike Brey, they won at least one game in 8 of those 12 appearances. And so what the heck? I'll go with the Irish to at least win one game in the Big Dance. So we want to take this time before we move on to the tier list, because I'm gonna take a second real quick actually to lament the fact that I had IPFW as my mid-major to watch, and then they lost last night in the Horizon League semifinals. So a big sad there. But you know what? A great season by them anyway. I mean, to make it to the Horizon League semifinals when they were, I think, preseason projected to be 9th in the Horizon League, so that's pretty incredible. Before we get to the tier list, though, for NCAA tournament teams, I do want to go ahead and do a shout out to our friends of the show. First at Anchor. This podcast is brought to you by Anchor. We go to anchor.fm if you're looking to start a podcast. It's really simple and easy. You can get right in. You can record either directly to the site, or you can upload just your own files. For an episode, it makes it really easy to just put an episode out there. And then it will, distribute those episodes to, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, a bunch of different platforms. It allows you to get, once you kind of get your feet under you, it allows you to get monetized, which is really cool, to, kind of make money so that you can do things, as far as like making improvements to the podcast and that kind of thing. So it's really, and it keeps track of all your old episodes, so it's really good to have like an archive of the work that you've done. So Anchor is a really great site. I would recommend it if you're looking to get into podcasting. Also, this podcast is brought to you by Eat Lunch and Board Game. It's a podcast brought to you by Bearded Board Games. That's done by Adam Collins, who talks about how playing board games can build bridges both in the workplace as well as just in general. So, he has a guest on every week talking about different games and things like that. So go ahead and check that out. That is Eat Lunch and Board Game. And then we also want to remind you that you can follow us at 3C, or you can go like us at 3C Media on Facebook, like us on Twitter follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go to our TikTok channel, 3C Media over there. I've been doing a lot of, college basketball March Madness moments here in the month of March. So that's, been really fun content to make. And then on 3C Media on YouTube, go subscribe to that, because that has been going off lately. The Hoosier High School Huddle has had a good first couple of weeks. Our IndyCar preview has been popping off. So we want to thank you guys all for your support on those, on the podcast, on this podcast, on the Hoosier High School Huddle, on the standalone videos that we put out. Thank you guys for your support there. And then remember that we do stream every week, twitch.tv/CraigCrash. That's where you can, hop in the chat, let us know your thoughts on the different topics that we cover. And then remember, you can hear us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course podcast. Now moving on to the tier list, I'm gonna have to get something set up here on the side of things of YouTube and Twitch and that kind of thing. So there we go. We're all set up. We're ready to go. So I selected about 30 teams, and they're going to be switched into tiers here, as you can see on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. The tiers are National Champion, Final Four, Elite Eight, Sweet 16, and eliminated in the first round. So I took the top 25 from the last poll, plus a few other teams that I just kind of randomly selected and threw in there. And I'm going to tell you how far I think these teams will go. And so it will kind of, obviously build on itself. Obviously, if I have two teams in National Champion and two teams in Final Four, that means those are the four teams I think are going to be in the Final Four, essentially. That's kind of how it'll work. So it's going to be kind of a ranking system. Like I said, I've got the top 25 teams. So we've got Gonzaga, Arizona, Baylor, Auburn, Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, Villanova, Tennessee, Purdue, Providence, Wisconsin, UCLA, Texas Tech, Arkansas, Illinois, St. Mary's, Houston, Murray State, UConn, USC, Texas, Colorado State, Iowa, UNC, Loyola Chicago, Ohio State, Boise State, South Dakota State, LSU. So those are the 30 teams that I selected. And so we are going to, like I said, rank them based on whether or not I think they're the Final Four is the furthest they'll go, whether or not I think they're going to go, all the way to the national, championship, if I think they're going to be eliminated in the first round. So let's go ahead and get going. With number one Gonzaga. They're the BPI leader, which means that's the basketball power index. It factors in strength of record, strength of schedule. It factors in a lot of different things there. Basically tells you like which is truly the best team in the country. They're projected as the top overall seed. They're 2-1 versus top 5 teams. Number 5 Texas, number 2 UCLA. And then they also defeated number 25 Texas Tech, but they lost to number 16 Alabama, who is unranked now. The only one of those top 5 teams that they played at the beginning of the year is still in the top 10. That team is Duke, who they lost to. And this is, just kind of one of those things. I know Gonzaga has made the national championship and has, been on the doorstep. They lost last year to Baylor. They lost to North Carolina a few years ago. And you know what? It's just kind of I'll believe it when I see it type of thing. So I have Gonzaga in the Final Four tier. I'm not ready to, pick them as a national champion. It seems like they've been, incrementally making it so close. I mean, they used to be kind of that Cinderella team in the tournament, where they would get to like the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight, not much further. And in the recent years, they've been able to make it to the Final Four, make it to the national championship game. But again, it's one of those things where until I see them actually win, I don't know that I'll go all in on them potentially winning. Number 2, Arizona. They're 28-3 on the season. They're number 4 in the BPI. And they have a top 5 strength of record, which means the teams they have played have been really good. They beat number 4 Michigan at the beginning of the year. They beat Illinois. They split versus UCLA. They did lose to number 19 Tennessee by 4, and the only peculiar loss really in their season was to Colorado. They lost by 14 back on February 26th. They're third in points per game, and they've got a plus 18 in point differential. They have been not just winning their games, they've been winning decisively, and for that reason, I got them in the national championship tier. They kind of creeped up as a team, towards that, stretch run of the season, towards February when we were looking at it, we're like, you know what? This team, has actually been doing a lot of great things. And so I really have Arizona as a team I believe could win the national championship, because you could say on one hand, oh, well, they play in the Pac-12. So, I mean, how really tough could their schedule have been? But the thing is, they're beating Pac-12 teams, by 10, by 15, by 20 points. They've played really well against teams like Illinois, UCLA, Tennessee, who I think are really good teams. Michigan, is a tournament team as well. So I believe in them. I think they can really get the job done. As far as number 3 Baylor, they're 26-5. They are the defending champs, and really the only reason I'm not going to put them in the national championship tier is because we haven't had back-to-back champions since 2007. So I'm going to err on the side of parity, especially this year in the NCAA tournament. You know, they are 5th in BPI, 1st in strength of record. They're 5-3 versus ranked opponents. They beat number 5 Kansas, number 21 Texas in the 3rd and 2nd to last games of the season. So they are really, taking it to some of the better teams in the country right now. So I'm going to go with Baylor as a potential Final Four team. We got Auburn next. Number 4 Auburn. They are 27-4. They got into the top 5 in January, and then it was at that point that they beat number 12 Kentucky. That catapulted them at the time to the number 1 team in the country. They entered February as the number 1 team in the country. Earned third, and then that's when they earned 3 of their 4 losses on the season. They haven't been able to string wins together here as of late. They've only been able to win 1 or 2 games at a time before they lose. So I'll wait until the SEC tournament before I pass really any more severe judgment on Auburn. So for Auburn, I know the last kind of normal tournament we had, they made it to the Elite Eight or the Final Four in 2019, but I've got them in the Elite Eight. I want to see a little bit more from them, and you might think, well, wait, they only have 4 losses. What more could you see? I just want to see them be able to string some wins together, get a few more wins against high caliber teams under my like. If they can go out and beat Kentucky, then in the SEC tournament, then I think that I might have a little bit more faith in them. Because remember, that's also part of this exercise as well, is the fact that we don't know really these thoughts that I'm having on these teams. They could change once the bracket is released on Sunday. It could be a much different thing to think about. Going on to number 5 Kentucky, they are 25-6. They're 3rd in BPI, 4th in strength of record. But against that schedule, they've seen losses to Duke, Auburn, Tennessee, and Arkansas. So they've lost to a lot of the tough teams that they've played. And you'll notice that this is kind of a theme in this tier list, is that even if you've had a great strength of record, fine. But at the same time, if you've not done enough against that strength of record, if you've lost to those teams, then I don't really give you the benefit of playing those tough teams. I'm still going to go ahead and put them in the Final Four. I think Kentucky can make it all the way there, but I need to see a little bit more of them. But I thought about putting them in the national champion tier, and I think according to the BPI, they're the second. They're the second most likely team to win, but I just don't have a ton of faith in them at this point. Kansas, number 6 in the country, 25-6. They're top 5 in both strength of record and strength of schedule, but what have they done against that schedule? Go 5-4 versus ranked teams this season. 2 of those 4 losses by double digits, including an 80-62 loss to Kentucky. Kansas has kind of turned into one of those teams where it's like, hey, they've got this illustrious history, but yet they've not been able to, put together. It always seems like they suffer a disappointing loss in the tournament. I mean, they made they've made the Final Four recently and that kind of thing, but I don't have a lot of faith in them either as far as getting super far. So I've got Kansas in the Elite 8 tier as well. Going on to number 7 Duke. They are 26-5. They have wins over Gonzaga and Kentucky. I'm putting them right here. I'm putting them in the national championship tier, and you want to know why? It's because if you want to look at, above all else, all the things that they've got going on for them, all the things that show that they could potentially be a national champion caliber team. It's also Coach K's last season. And I know that they didn't finish Coach K's career at Cameron Indoor the greatest. They lost to North Carolina. But I mean, what greater motivational, what more motivation do you need than to try to send Coach K out as a national champion? So I've got them in the national championship tier. Moving on to number 8, Villanova. They have they're 23-7. They do have an impressive win over number 17 Tennessee early on in the season, but they came up short against UCLA, Purdue, and Baylor. They're projected as a 3 seed, so I think they can make a run. But Villanova always catches me, kind of sleeping, kind of napping a little bit on them. I don't usually. I'm always hesitant to pick them because when you play in a conference like the Big East, which let's face it, I mean, yeah, they've got Providence, they've got Xavier's usually pretty solid. They've got I think UConn's back in the Big East now too. I mean, you've got some strong teams, but I mean, just that conference as a whole is not super great. And so when you have that, when you all you've done is beat up on your own conference, it's kind of the thing that I hate about college football, where teams get kind of graded on the fact that, like, oh, you just beat up an easy schedule. But I think, as far as this goes, when I'm trying to pick a champion who's I think is going to break through March Madness, having a schedule against Big East teams and only really having success against Big East teams is where I kind of get a little, hesitant to pick, teams like Villanova. So I'm putting Villanova in the Elite Eight tier. I think they can have a strong run. I'm just not ready to put them in the Final Four of the national championship tier. Moving on to Tennessee. They are the number 9 team in the country. They're 23-7. Since the start of February, they have won 9 of 10. They split their series with Arkansas, so if you want to play that game where you kind of just negated the one loss that you've had down the stretch run, I mean, they've been really good. So basically, they beat everyone they've played since February. They did beat number 3 Auburn and number 4 Kentucky in that span, so I think they're getting hot at the right time. I've got Tennessee in that Final Four category up there. As far as the Sweet 16, we already talked about Purdue. I think Purdue can get to the Sweet 16. It will remain to be seen whether or not they can get past that. The Sweet 16 level is also where I have number 12, Wisconsin. I bragged about Wisconsin in our February discussion about, like, oh, hey, what teams can what can we look forward to here in the month of February? As far as what teams have been super impressive at that point in the season, and Wisconsin was that team for me because they've been doing well despite really not having any impressive stats. I mean, they're tied for first in the Big Ten. For the Big Ten championship, despite being in the lower echelon in a lot of major statistical categories. And the thing that kind of jumped out to me as I was looking at their record is that it seems like every big win is negated by a loss. They'll go out and beat Purdue and then lose to, like, Northwestern, so it doesn't bode well for the tournament. So I think Wisconsin can make a good run, but I'm not comfortable putting them beyond Sweet 16 at this point. Providence, looking at them, they're number 11. They're 24-4. Their only impressive non-conference win was against Texas Tech when they were unranked. They haven't beat a ranked team outside the Big East, and they were swept by Villanova. On top of that, they haven't made the Sweet 16 since 1997, and I think that streak will continue. Put the Providence Friars. I think they're going to be eliminated in the first weekend. Again, I just don't have a ton of faith, in this team. Like I said, they beat up, a weak Big East. Or a weaker Big East, and they against a team that they would be, you'd want, because I mean, if they had maybe swept Villanova or got one win over Villanova and then maybe beat one more team that was ranked, I might feel more comfortable putting in the Sweet 16. But I just don't think the Friars are gonna do much come tournament time. Number 12, the number 12 team in the country is UCLA. Or wait, no, I don't have the 12th team in the country because I think that's where Wisconsin was 12, I believe. I think I might have gotten that wrong. Let me just kind of, wait, I forgot that's my screen there. Gotta keep that up. Okay, looking at ranked teams here. 1 second. Okay, I didn't skip anybody. Okay, Wisconsin was 12. Providence was 11. Okay, we're in good shape. Don't worry. All right, getting back into the groove here. I just want to make sure because I got confused on the numbers because when I started this tier list research, it was before the last rankings came out. So you have to forgive me there. Number 13, UCLA. They're not in the top 50 when it comes to points per game, field goal percentage, or 3-point percentage. But I'm not giving up on a team that I picked to be in the Final Four at the beginning of the season, so I went ahead and I threw them in the Elite Eight. I don't think they're gonna make the Final Four again this season, but I had a tough time not having them in kind of that middle category. So give me UCLA to at least make the Sweet 16. Number 14, Texas Tech. They are 7-3 against ranked teams this season, including wins over Texas, Kansas, and sweeping the season series against Baylor, who I said, like I said earlier, is a team I would normally have in the national championship discussion if it weren't for the fact that teams don't typically win back-to-back here as of late. So I also have Texas Tech in that Elite Eight category. Number 15, Arkansas. They are 24-7. They started the season 10-5. That was on January 8th when they had that record, and over the last 2 or so months, they are 14-2. They are another SEC team getting hot at the right time. So I'm gonna have Arkansas as a potential Elite Eight team. I think they can be really dangerous once the tournament starts. Number 16, Illinois. They are 22-8. They're the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament. They've got the 11th leading scorer in the country in Kofi Cockburn. He averages 21 points per game. Though they are 3-4 versus ranked opponents, maybe they'll be able to avenge, their last season's, tournament run where they got bounced by Loyola in the round of 32. So I've got Illinois in that Elite Eight tier as well. Looking at St. Mary's, the Gales, they are 24-6. They split the season series with Gonzaga, and that's really about it for St. Mary's. Again, another team, in the West Coast Conference, nothing super notable about what they've done this season schedule-wise, and so that just doesn't get the juices flowing for me as far as, going into the tournament. I mean, looking at bracketology here, I want to see, they're ranked as a 6th seed, so, like, if they're in this situation, that they're projected in, right now, ESPN bracketology has them in the Indianapolis bracket in the Midwest as a 6th seed, and the team they would play if they moved on would be Purdue if Purdue beat the 14th seed. So, it just doesn't do it for me. So I also have them getting eliminated in the first round. I just, one of those things where I'll believe it when I see it. Houston, looking at the Houston Cougars, they are 26-5. They're second to Gonzaga in terms of BPI. They're a top 20 strength of record, but if I'm being honest, of this clump of like top 19 or so schools, top 20 or so schools, they're the best, and they're the team I have the most faith in. So I will put them in the Sweet 16, but again, schedule's not super impressive. Moving on to Murray State. They are 30-2 on the season, but again, just not impressed by their schedule, the eye test. I mean, look, it's not like I expect these teams to go out and like, oh, Murray State should go schedule Kentucky. They should go schedule Kansas. They should go schedule... But it's just like, I don't know, be another mid-major school that I, like, go play Gonzaga. Go play, go play, trying to think, like, Loyola. I know Loyola's not the greatest this year either, but go play another, like, go play Wisconsin. Go play another, like, fringe, team in the Big Ten where I'm like, okay, I can, go play Ohio State. I might be able to go play Louisville even. I mean, I know Louisville's not that great in the ACC, but that's at least another, power conference school that you could, kind of notch on your belt. Hey, we beat an ACC school. We beat Louisville. I say that because they're in that, Murray State's in that area. So sorry to the Fighting Jordan Sharps. He's a buddy of mine from 1070. I have Murray State in the eliminated in the first round category. Like I said, just not super impressed. Going on to UConn, number 20 in the country. They're 22-8. Their win they did beat Auburn at the beginning of the year, but that is way in the rearview mirror. They are 1-3 versus ranked teams. They did split with Villanova. I will throw them up here in the Sweet 16, but I, again, not super confident about what they'll be able to do come March. I should have probably spread out the good teams a little bit more, not just gone down 1 through 25 in ranking, because I feel bad because every sentence I feel like is ended with like, I just don't have a lot of faith in them. And that moves us to USC. They're number 21 in the country. They're 25-6. They're 1-3 versus ranked teams. this season. They split the series with UCLA, but that gets them. They're third in the Pac-12. That gets them to about a 7 seed in the tournament. So I just that means that if they win against the 10 seed, they'll be playing a 2 seed. So they'll be playing the likes of Arizona. Well, Arizona will probably be 1 seed, but they'll be playing the likes of Kansas, Villanova, UCLA, Tennessee, whoever. And I just don't like their chances to get past them. So I think they'll be eliminated in the first weekend as well. So I've got USC down there. Number 22, Texas. They are 21-10. They're a top 20 school in terms of BPI, strength of schedule, and strength of record. They've had to play 11 ranked teams this season, including there was a stretch I think of 4 or 5 games in a row against ranked teams. And so yeah, they are 3-8. But man, talk about having to go through a gauntlet. That is what Texas has had to deal with this season. They are projected out as a 5 seed, so I think they can at least make the Sweet 16. So I have faith in the Longhorns in getting at least into the second weekend. Number 23, Colorado State. Again, copy and paste what I said about Murray State, what I said about Providence, what I said about St. Mary's. Fantastic for Colorado State. That was a team when I looked and kind of saw where they were in the Mountain West. I was like, wow, they're doing really well. It's not a team that you see traditionally at the top of the Mountain West, so great season. Maybe, and that means they're probably most likely to make a run since they're a team that you don't typically see there, but I'm going to say they're eliminated in the first weekend. They were 24-4 on the season, though, so that's pretty impressive. Looking at Iowa, the 24th ranked team in the country. Looking at Iowa on the season, they are 22-9. They're the 5th best team in terms of scoring in the country. They are 83. They average 83 points per game. They have Keegan Murray, who's the 4th leading scorer in the country. He averages 23 points per game. So when you have a player like that who's a true difference maker, if he can get going, I think they can do some good things. They are projected as a 6 seed. The road will be relatively tough, but I'm throwing them in the Sweet 16 conversation. I think Iowa can get there. That moves us on to number 25, the last of our ranked teams before we just kind of have a hodgepodge of just kind of random teams. I have, North Carolina. They've won 11 of their last 13 games, highlighted by a win over Duke at Cameron Indoor on the last weekend of the season. So I think that can potentially propel them. We'll see what they do in the ACC tournament, but I think that can potentially propel them to a run. So I've got UNC in the Sweet 16. Looking at Loyola, and you know what? They're the Missouri Valley Conference champions, Loyola Chicago. They're 25-7, and honestly, this is me just hoping that they have that the Ramblers still have some magic in them. So I'm going to throw Loyola up there in the potential Sweet 16 run as well. Looking at Ohio State, one of the other random teams kind of selected here, they are 19-10. They started February at 13-5. They had just gotten within 3 of defeating Purdue, who was 6th at the time, and so things looked relatively good for Ohio State. And I put them on here as like, oh hey, maybe Big Ten team, maybe they can find a way to make a run. They finished the season 6-5 and have lost 3 of their last 4. So they'll play Purdue most likely in the Big Ten tournament. So I don't see them doing much there. So I think Ohio State is going to be out. Eliminated in the first weekend. I had to take a little sip of Gatorade there. The red Gatorade. It's really good. I used to be a grape guy, but I've been drinking a lot of fruit punch lately. 3 teams left to go through on the tier list here, and we look at Boise State. They're 24-7, and again, another schedule that just doesn't pass the eye test, and they're projected as a 7 seed. So kind of like the same thing with USC. Could they win the first game and make it to the round of 32? Sure, I think they could. But as far as beating a 2 seed, beating the likes of a Kansas, a Villanova, a Texas Tech, a Tennessee, I just don't see it. So I've got Boise State in that eliminated in the first round. But you know what? You look at this and you say, Craig, you've been really mean, with the exception of Gonzaga and Villanova and Houston and UConn. In Loyola, you've been relatively mean to the mid-major schools. Why don't you give them some love? Why aren't you, giving them, the love that they're due? You know what? I will. South Dakota State, they're 29-4. They're projected as a 12 seed, so already good in my book. You've got the 12/5 magic. They're the second best scoring team in the country behind Gonzaga. They average 87 points per game, and what's great is they also they hit 45% of their three-pointers, which is best in the country. So, I mean, if their shooters get hot, I mean, this is a dangerous team, and they also lead the country in field goal percentage. So, I mean, this is a team that I think could go make a Sweet 16 run. I really like what the South Dakota Jackrabbits are doing. So I've got them in that Sweet 16 tier. And then finally, I know you see a lot of other teams down here if you're watching on YouTube. That's because I just found a list of all the college basketball teams. Imagine if I just made you guys sit here through every single college basketball team and was like, hey, we're going to go through each of these teams and we're going to tell you whether or not we think they're going to do well in the tournament. Some may not even make the tournament. So, but no. So I was able to move the teams I wanted to the top, and that was really convenient. But finally, we are at LSU. They're 21-10. They were 15-1 in January. So they are 6-9 down the stretch. They're 15th in terms of BPI. They had a top 25 strength of schedule, and a top 25 strength of record. But I think if they get into the right bracket, they can make a run. That's kind of why I've got them in the Sweet 16 tier, because for instance, right now in bracketology on ESPN, they are projected as a 6th seed playing Michigan in the first round. So I think they could beat Michigan. I think they really could. Michigan's not a super hot team either. I think LSU could win that one. And then they would play the winner of Texas Tech and Seattle. And I know I have Texas Tech in that Elite 8 tier. But that doesn't mean I don't think they couldn't get upset. So LSU is a team that showed in the beginning of the season they can play at that high caliber level, win 15 of 16 games, go on a run and be really good. Because during that span, they beat, ranked teams as well. It's like they were playing very strongly. But so they're a team I think that could potentially make a run if they're put in kind of the right bracket and right situation. And that's kind of the feeling on all of these teams. I mean, like I said before, I mean, this is a matter of whether or not these teams get in the right bracket. This is how I feel about these teams before we get to that point where they're, placed in a bracket or anything like that. So we'll see what these teams are able to do, come, next week, because that's where we'll be. This time next week, we'll be talking about the play-in games and that kind of thing. So there's the tier list. Got Arizona and Duke in my national championship tier. You got Final Four as Gonzaga, Baylor, Kentucky, Tennessee, Elite 8 teams. Auburn, Kansas, Villanova, Auburn, Kansas, Villanova, UCLA, Texas Tech, Arkansas, Illinois. Sweet 16, I've got Purdue, Wisconsin, Houston, UConn, Texas, Iowa, UNC, Loyola, South Dakota State, and LSU. And the teams I think will be eliminated in the first round of that kind of top 30 in the country. Providence, St. Mary's, Murray State, USC, Colorado State, Ohio State, and Boise State. So that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course podcast. Thank you guys all for watching, listening, however you consume the podcast this week. Again, remember, you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Be sure to follow at 3C Media Sports on Twitter. That's the best way, the best way to see the latest content, because we also have a lot of content coming up on places like TikTok. 3C Media on TikTok, a lot of content over there as well. 3C Media on YouTube. Videos have been doing really well lately, so thank you guys for your support there. Remember, you can watch us live every week, twitch.tv/CraigCrash. If you want to, contribute, say, your piece in the chat, we'd love to have you in here. And remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course podcast. Remember, the Hoosier High School Huddle is coming. Hoosier High School Huddle, not Hoosier High School Cuddle. The Hoosier High School Huddle is coming to you guys on Friday, so make sure you guys keep your eyes peeled for that. Next week, we will have a guest. It'll be Midcourt Madness, the gentleman from that podcast, so that'll be a lot of fun. They will be helping us break down the tournament. That will be a lot of fun. And it'll be time to break down the bracket. Like I said, Selection Sunday is this week. We're going to know what these tournaments look like, and it's going to be really fun to kind of get into the weeds and dive in. Remember, you can follow me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. Next week is going to be a lot of fun, but until then, have a good one, everybody.